Vinnie Paul from Pantera, Skin Basher, Thrash. Hey, I'm Diamond Darrell, lead guitar. Terry Lee, lead vocals. Mom!
This is Rex rocking from Pantera. If you like it hot and heavy, we got it. Come on, guys!
Pantera has been all over the place and fresh on everyone's minds since their sort of pseudo reunion last year, with core members Phil Anselmo and Rex Brown returning, with drummer Charlie Benante from Anthrax filling in the spot for the late Vinnie Paul, and Zakk Wylde filling the spot of Diamond Darrell. On Monday, the band announced the second leg of their quote-unquote comeback tour with special guest Lamb of God. So today, I thought it would be fun to take a look at Pantera during their Glam days when they also had other band names before they were known as Pantera. Let's discuss. Originally known as Gemini, Diamond Vinnie first formed the band in 1981 after, of course, being influenced by bands such as Kiss, Van Halen, Heart, and Journey, the latter two of which actually were the inspiration for the band name Gemini, especially with Journey having album titles such as Escape, Infinity, Evolution, so on and so forth. And Journey also probably influenced the band's second name, Eternity, which according to Vinnie, they thought was a cool name and much better than Gemini. My opinion, though, Gemini is the better name of the two, although I would also argue that neither name is really all that great to begin with. It wasn't until one day in the drumline when a fellow band student would suggest to Vinnie that he change the name of his band to Pantera, which is one of the hottest race cars of the time, and also Spanish for panther. Vinnie took the advice, and thus the original lineup of Pantera was born, with Vinnie Paul on drums, his brother Darrell Abbott on guitar, bassist Tommy Bradford, lead vocalist Donnie Hart, and Terry Glaze on rhythm guitar, although that was short-lived as Donnie Hart would eventually leave the band in '82, with Terry Glaze taking over lead vocal duties. Bassist Tommy Bradford would exit in '82 as well, being replaced by none other than Rex Brown, although of course in those days he was known as Rex Rocker. The lineup changes would happen just in time for Pantera's first studio album, 1983's Metal Magic, to feature 3/4 of the classic Pantera lineup, sans Anselmo of course, and featured such tracks as Ride My Rocket, Tell Me If You Want It, Nothing On But the Radio, and Sad Lover. The album was produced by the Abbott brothers' father, Jerry Abbott, who's a well-known country producer and songwriter, and the record was also independently released on their own label, also called Metal Magic. You know, I gotta say, so many people poke fun at Pantera's glam era, and even to this day, the band themselves, with the remaining two members, especially Rex, totally disown those first 4 records, but Metal Magic is seriously solid as fuck, and I would even argue that it's a cut above some of the other 80s bands that experienced far bigger success than Pantera did when they were doing that style. Very classic Def Leppard sounding, and you know, there's definitely some Pantera 90s in there, especially with Dime soloing. It's absolutely incredible, especially when you consider that Dime was just like 16 years old, I think, when the record dropped. Anyways, the band spent their time promoting their debut record by opening shows for such bands from the time as Stryper, Dokken, Quiet Riot, and this time period would also find 2 of the members sort of changing up their names a little bit. Terry Glaze would replace the Glaze, which that sounds a little strange, with Lee becoming Terrence Lee, which honestly, for the style of music that they were going, he could have just kept the name Glaze. I mean, it's very fitting for an 80s hair band, if you will. And Darrell would turn into Diamond Darrell, and what feels like an obvious nod to Diamond David Lee Roth, of course, from Van Halen. In 1984, the band would release their second album, Projects in the Jungle, which certainly retains the quote-unquote glam elements from Metal Magic, but it also sees the band slowly transitioning out of their hair era, or Hera, if you will, and moving closer to what they would end up becoming. But Projects in the Jungle is still quite a far cry from something like Far Beyond Driven or something. Kind of like heavier Def Leppard, and once again produced by Jerry Abbott. The album features the tracks All Over Tonight, Blue Light Turning Red, the title track, Heavy Metal Rules, and Only a Heartbeat Away. The band would also make their first official music video for the lead single from Projects in the Jungle, All Over Tonight. And goddamn, it's so fucking weird talking about Pantera and then saying song titles like Ride My Rocket or All Over Tonight, which, you know, the song is a banger and the video it's all right, but it's just essentially your standard 80s live video affair. A quick sidebar, I also found footage of Pantera covering Metallica's Seek and Destroy in 1984 with Dime on vocals. And holy shit, if you had your eyes closed, I mean, you would think that Hetfield is singing. I'll put the link to the whole thing down below, but here's a very quick clip. You can check it out. It's fucking nuts. Real quick though, I want to jump in and give a shout out to Mammoth Headwear for sponsoring this video, because maybe you're just like me, you have a ginormous head, you can't hardly ever find a hat that fits you properly. Look no further than mammothheadwear.com. I'm actually wearing a Mammoth hat right now and it fits me like a dream. You can go to their website, mammothheadwear.com, use code Logan at checkout for 10% off your order. And it's not just hats either. They got all sorts of stuff, shirts, hoodies, hats, beanies, all that kind of stuff. Mammoth Headwear is the undisputed place to go if you have a massive head like I do. By 1985, Pantera had released their third record, the yet again Jerry Abbott produced I Am the Night, which saw the band leaning even heavier into what they would eventually become down the road, although still definitely sticking true to their roots, with the record selling around 25,000 copies, which, I don't know, I think that's a rather impressive accomplishment for an underground metal band putting records out on their own independent label with relatively poor distribution at the time. To be fair, I don't have the sales figures from their first two records, so maybe 25,000 was a little bit light, but seems fairly strong to me given the situation that they were in at the time. There's also a track on the record called Darrell Goes to the Movies, which is really just a minute and a half of Dime, well, I guess at that time, Diamond, sorry. Playing solo, and it's absolutely incredible. The album also produced the band's second music video for the track Hot and Heavy, which is very, very reminiscent of Van Halen's Hot for Teacher. It's a pretty cool video though. I'll put the link down in the description. The following year, in 1986, due to some rising tensions and inner turmoil within the band, vocalist Terry Glaze, or Terrence Lee, whatever the hell you want to call him, left the band in part due to his vocal style and writing not really fitting what the band was trying to do at the time. And of course, at that time, they were just not getting along. I think at one point he said he enjoyed the 2 hours a day on stage, but the other 22 hours of the day were just completely miserable. But he did leave Pantera in time to join the band Lord Tracy, which was formed by former Black Oak, Arkansas bassist Kinley Wolf for their debut album, 1989's Deaf Gods of Babylon. This led to the remaining three members of the band scrambling to find a replacement vocalist and going through a handful of guys in a super, super short period of time, including Matt Lamore, who I guess closely resembled David Coverdale of Whitesnake, but allegedly he was unable to hit the same high notes of Glaze, so the whole thing quickly fell apart, although Lamore ended up joining the band Diamond. They then tried a guy named Rick, and I'm sure I'm going to fuck up this last name pronunciation, Mathiasen, but there were some personality conflicts at that time, I guess, so that fizzled out super quick as well, and Rick would end up joining Steel Profits and Agent Steel later on in his career. The band then enlisted former Abbott Brothers classmate David Peacock from the band Forced Entry, but after recording what would go on to become the band's fourth album, Power Metal, it was quickly realized that Peacock was not the right fit for the band. Hell, they even tried reuniting with the original vocalist Donnie Hart, but all parties knew right away that that was just not the right fit, so Hart was out for a second and final time. 1986 would end up proving to be a whirlwind year for Pantera though, because despite all of the lead singer turnover, they would also enlist a permanent vocalist that same year, of course the one and only Phil Anselmo, a New Orleans native who the band met on the road in previous touring, who had previously spent time fronting Not Danzig, Samhain, and Razor White. He was hired on the spot at his audition, of which he recalled in 2012. We had a talk, and then I tried out with a bunch of Iron Maiden and Priest songs. I was real familiar with Priest. When I was a kid, I used to come home from school, put on Unleashed in the East, and sing it note for fucking note. I could hit all the high parts, I'm proud to say. So we just jammed on this stuff, and then they played me some of their new demos, a lot of which became power metal. It was a lot more aggressive than their other stuff. I was like, wow, you're heading in the right direction. According to Rex, in the 2013 book Official Truth 101 Proof, The Inside Story of Pantera, from the first time the guy walked in the door, we could just tell he had this aura. There was testosterone just fucking flying. When he came in the fold, we rehearsed in Dime's mom's front living room with amps on 12, and there it was. I had a bottle of tequila, and we smoked a joint and played every Judas Priest song we knew. There's a lot of Priest on power metal. That was the one thing that Darrell and Phil immediately had in common. In 1988, Pantera would release the final album from their era, Power Metal. The record was once again produced by the Abbott brothers' father, Jerry Abbott, but this time alongside Keel guitarist Mark Ferrari on a couple of songs, and he also plays on a few songs on the record as well, including We'll Meet Again and Proud to Be Loud, the latter of which he also holds a songwriting credit on. And Keel would eventually release their version of it in 1998 on Keel 6, Back in Action. The Pantera version of the song, though, also appears in the 2001 movie Donnie Darko, but it's credited to the fictitious The Dead Green Mummies, since Pantera, especially Rex, like I mentioned earlier, completely disowns that entire time period of the band, which is just so fucking stupid, because if you go on YouTube, you look up any of these first four albums, I mean, just look at the comments. Everybody is like, holy shit, this is so great, blah, blah, blah. This is just as good as their stuff in the 90s, just as good at playing the glam stuff as they were the groove metal. I mean, yeah, there's definitely some naysayers too, like I said earlier, but people are definitely into this shit. So their resistance to this, especially Rex, is just fucking stupid. Reissue these fucking records already. Power Metal was actually almost released via Gold Mountain Records due to some label push from Mark Ferrari, but the label head Danny Goldberg, I guess, told the band that he thought the record was too heavy, and according to Vinny, he tried to steer them into sounding more like Bon Jovi, but the band, of course, declined, resulting in the album being released via Metal Magic. You know, you would think that the closing song on Power Metal, a song called PST 88, I gotta point this out, you would think that it is a heavily Metallica-flavored Steel Panther song because it's got this hilarious vocal chant throughout the entire song. I mean, it's the main hook of the song, and it just goes tight tonight, which is just fucking hilarious, just amazing. I can't even explain it. It's amazing. According to Phil Anselmo, Power Metal was a pure power metal record, you know? To say I'm proud of it, no, I'm not. But to say that we as a band were still trying to discover who the fuck we were and what we could do, that's very evident. Shit, I was in the band probably 2 weeks when all of a sudden, sure enough, they got all these songs demoed that I had heard on my first visit, and I'm in the studio and they're all, okay, come up with heavy metal lyrics right here on the spot and let's just fucking do it. I did the best I could, and I think they were heavier overall, more attacking, I guess. But it wasn't the kind of thing I put my heart and soul into. I didn't bleed for these songs like I did later in the band's career. Ironically, as power metal was heavily inspired by key albums from all four bands of the Big Four of thrash, including Megadeth, Dave Mustaine actually attempted to recruit Dimebag, still Diamond at the time, into Megadeth the same year that Power Metal was released, 1988, recalling in an interview with the Tampa Bay Times, I actually called him up and asked him to play in Megadeth. Fate would have completely changed if I would have called him before I called Nick Menza. I said, hey, Darrell, I'm looking for a guitar player. And he goes, can I bring my brother? And I went, who's your brother? He goes, Vinnie Paul. Don't you know Vinnie Paul? He wanted to bring his brother and have him play with us. And I go, oh man, I just hired Nick Menza. Can you imagine what Vinny and Darrell would have been with me and Junior, of course referring to David Ellefson, would have been pretty cool. That would have been completely insane if that would have happened, and Pantera would have most likely ceased to exist following power metal. It's most certainly an interesting hypothetical to think about for sure. Following the release of power metal and the whole Megadeth thing not working out, Pantera would sign to Atco Records, and by 1990, they would ditch the Glam names, and Phil Anselmo, Rex Brown, Diamond Darrell, and Vinnie Paul would release the record that would set them up for heavy metal domination, if you will. That record, Cowboys from Hell. All right, though, I gotta run. My fiance is waiting to ride my rocket, and I just know that her will be tight tonight, so I gotta go. But thanks so much for watching. Feel free to subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks to Mammoth Headwear for sponsoring this video, where you can go to mammothheadwear.com, use code Logan at checkout for 10% off your order. Thanks again for sticking through the whole thing. I am still under the weather, kind of sounding like shit. So thank you again very, very much for watching, and I will see you next time.